Welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast. I'm Kristi Piehl. Today's guest is going to inspire and educate us. Holly Hardman is a film writer, director, and producer. Her most recent project, As Prescribed, was inspired by her own experience with a medication that fundamentally changed her life and ultimately caused her to flip the script on her career. Holly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And you're right. Flipped my script, that's for sure. The benzodiazepine.
And you said it, and the reason I didn't say it was because I didn't want to mispronounce it. So let's talk about the medication, what it is, and the reason that your film is called As Prescribed is because essentially you are prescribed something, like many people are, but what it was supposed to do and what it ended up doing, there's a disconnect there. So explain to us what it is so that we can understand what it's supposed to do.
Well, benzodiazepines are a class of drug that are usually prescribed for anxiety, insomnia, that sort of thing. But they are so widely prescribed that people are even given a drug like Ativan for a skin condition. I mean, it's not the best medicine, needless to say. I was given clonazepam, Klonopin, for ME/CFS. I had that in the 90s. We used to call it SIFIDS, chronic fatigue syndrome. And this was a protocol that was developed by a practitioner out of North Carolina, Dr. Paul Shaney. He had the idea that everybody who had chronic fatigue syndrome was going to benefit. And the theory was that the benzodiazepine would slow your overactivated system down because you do have cortisol issues, blah, blah, blah. And that was that. That was a bit of junk science I wish I'd never been exposed to. And I did recover from the chronic fatigue syndrome, but this medication, I was advised by doctors after that, maybe you want to continue taking this. You live in New York City, you have a stressful life. Everybody's just taking these, just takes the edge off. You can take this the rest of your life. So I thought I was taking a very safe medication, taking less than I had when I had chronic fatigue syndrome. But I did find, sure, it helps me sleep and flying, I would have, fear of flying sort of thing. And I thought it was a very useful medication. But at the same time, I was developing symptoms that were disturbing, confusing, painful, just a laundry list of strange symptoms I had developed. And, I wasn't seeing a million doctors, but doctors I saw would say, oh, that's just a relapse of CFS, ME. And I would say, it is not, because I'm very familiar with that. And so I went a number of years. Looking back now, I realized I was always dealing with interdose withdrawal. And finally, I decided that I was at a point in my life where I was wondering why I was even taking any prescribed medication. And I said, I don't even understand what this is. Yes, it helps me sleep, but I just don't like the idea of taking something like this, whatever it is. I still didn't truly understand what it was, even though I had, looked at the insert in the packaging and everything. And actually, I'll mention that when I was first given clonazepam, there wasn't much of a warning in the insert, which I checked, and I asked my doctor, is this safe? This might be of interest to people listening. I saw something that made me think it's like Valium. And I said, is this anything like Valium? I know I don't want to take Valium. And the doctor said, oh, no, yes, Valium can be very problematic. And Klonopin was developed to deal with those problems. And it's perfectly safe. Another doctor who said you can take this for the rest of your life. So, all right, fast forward, many years later, I'm having all these strange symptoms. And one doctor said, oh, it's lead and mercury toxicity, that sort of thing. So I would go through these detoxes, and things were just getting worse and worse. And so I was actually going through a period where I was feeling reasonably healthy. And as I say, I just didn't want to be taking a medication, especially if I didn't understand anymore why I was taking it. And so I stopped.
Cold turkey, you just stopped.
Cold turkey wouldn't quite describe it in that moment, but you're right. It can be described as cold turkey. I had so little understanding of what I was taking, and that there was a kind of physiological dependency. That's not a phrase I would have thought. I thought, I'll just stop this medication. Maybe I'll have some issues for a couple of weeks, but it's going to all be okay. And I was taking it at that point, maybe sometimes twice a week, sometimes once every couple of weeks, sometimes once every few weeks. Never made the connection to some of these basically being an intradose withdrawal and having crazy symptoms. So I stopped, in about 4 days after, I was start paying more attention to what was happening and saying this, I'm starting to think that maybe these symptoms are actually related to this medication. I feel like I have to go to the emergency room. So I was like, could this really be the medication? So I managed to type stopping Klonopin. And actually, it was on Wikipedia that I found how dangerous this was and how this safe medication was not so safe. It is just not so safe. And I wish I'd been advised of that years ago. I think there are millions of people who also wish they'd been better informed. And so at the same time, at the same sort of Googling session, I found the Ashton Manual. And I also found an essay written by Geraldine Burns, who's in the film. She's like the chief protagonist, chief participant in the film. And so I kind of had a good idea of, or a better idea of what I was dealing with. I emailed my doctor, my prescribing doctor, who was wonderful, by the way. And I said, I'm going to discontinue this medication, but I'm going to need help. And I sent her the Ashton Manual. She agreed to help me. And so that was the beginning of my 22-month taper off clonazepam.
I think you bring up a few things that I think we can like parse out. And number one is that, you know, when I was a child and maybe even in my 20s or 30s, like whatever a physician said, almost like what a police person, you know, a police officer says, or like there are these roles where I think we're taught not to question. And in society in general, I think we've seen some really good examples of people who are in these roles where we're taught not to question, that they actually need to be questioned. Like they really, really need to be questioned. In some cases, they need to be in jail, because we all can point to, you know, some police folks, some pharmaceutical makers. And then the flip side of that, which I think is really unfortunate, is that there are some really incredible people in these physicians, Eastern, Western medicine, depending upon, you know, what you prescribe to, who are incredible. And there's really no good way to know if you've got one who is going to give you information and the full picture, or if you've got one that is like, meh, here's a script, go have a great day. And it's too bad that there isn't a better way to understand. And what I've gotten, you know, as I've aged and as my kids have had different medical things and as I've had different medical things, is like, get a second opinion, right? Like no matter what it is, a great doctor will welcome a second opinion, will encourage you to get a second opinion, wants you to get a second opinion, and will collaborate with another physician or another specialist, because at the end of the day, they will admit that there's, for most things, more than one way to get to the answer. So I think that's just like a valuable little piece of information out there, because if you're a physician listening, like there's amazing people in your profession, and there's some folks that you probably wish weren't in your, never took the Hippocratic Oath, right? So I just want to, like, as a little disclaimer, but to your point, and what your film is trying to do is to educate. And it's also really fascinating to me that you got to an answer on the one place that people are like, never go get medical information from, the internet. So how has your, you know, the film and your experience, and you're very open with sharing it, how have you heard that it's helped people?
Oh, absolutely. Even when we were in production and we cut together a little trailer, That was the beginning of, I had an email where people could reach me, and I was hearing from people every day, and and then we put up a Facebook page, and we ended up with, I think we had like 3,000 by the time the film premiere had its festival launch, and we hadn't done any real promotion at all, just organically, we had 3,000 followers. And, usually you have to invest a little in that. They just came to us, and we didn't push in that way. It was more about finding out what do people need from us? What are people going to need from this film? And so there was an exchange, and it was everything from people really wanting me to help them with tapers, which I did not feel qualified to do, but I tried to guide some people in the direction where they could get actual medical help, what we call benzo-wise medical help, and just trying to, assure people that completing the film, we were going to try to change the narrative, because what most of the people that I was hearing from were saying was that their doctors were accusing them, and this was, not that of abusing their medication when they were taking it as prescribed, to explain why they were having issues. Because I think most doctors know that people can have issues with benzodiazepines, but they're not taught much in medical school. I think a lot of doctors would really like to know the more recent research that's been done. A lot of it comes from the lived experience community. And as a matter of fact, I'll sort of, add a side note here, the FDA has more recently issued a boxed warning for benzodiazepines about the long-term usage, advising doctors not to prescribe them long-term. And that's really the issue. It's not so much, because also I want to make the claim that it's not a disclaimer, it's a real claim. We have to protect people who are taking these, and these medications are incredibly helpful short-term, just incredibly. It's like Ativan, Klonopin, Xanax, Valium. I'm sure I'm missing one, Restoril. Short-term, very helpful medications. And so doctors aren't necessarily making that connection between what the patient maybe was originally given the medication for, and then these other issues that pop up, like pain and dysregulated hormonal function. It just goes on, the list goes on and on. I just say it, make a blanket statement. Think of your nervous system and something that can disrupt it. And that's what benzodiazepines do. And it's the menu of the things that can go wrong is just immense. And yeah, and I think those of us who make it through are just so grateful that we survived it.
And because our bodies are all so unique, and the genetic makeup of each of our bodies and all the different other factors that we choose or don't choose to have as part of our physical makeup, means that the way that these drugs show up in symptoms with different people, they're different. So it isn't like, oh, everyone who takes it too long, you get a headache on day 35 and now it shows up different in every different person, which makes it that much more complex, correct?
It's so inexact, the timing of it, and some people are not going to have any issues at all taking long-term, but I'm going to state, I think more than 50%. I didn't think that when I first started the film, but I'm at the point where I think, yeah, it's that bad. It's that widespread, just when it's long-term. And with what we want to always advise people is to not stop taking the benzodiazepine abruptly, and to even, some of the help I found was online in different groups, like Facebook groups and a platform called Benzo Buddies, because what you start to see, and when you talk about a symptom here, a symptom there, it's really a laundry list. There are people who list, and this is where we find the connection between people who have been harmed. It's not just one symptom or two symptoms, it's a laundry list. And I know, I interviewed a woman for an op-ed not long ago. She had 100 symptoms that she had kept track of. I think I was more in the 50 symptom realm.
That's amazing. And none of these symptoms, just to be clear, like they're not positive. Like you didn't have more energy. You didn't have a greater capacity to think. These were all symptoms that were not positive.
Adverse effects.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what are, in the work that you're doing and with the film and the work that continues on, you just mentioned an op-ed, what are your goals?
Well, I love doing this interview right now, for example, because it really fits into our goals for the film and its purpose, which is once you're in the realm of benzodiazepine injury, you tend to connect with a community and people are really supportive of each other and they're validating people's experiences. But I would love a world where people didn't have to get there, that we just had general knowledge that benzodiazepines helpful short term. I'm going to say the safest thing to do, unless we can find some test that can because you mentioned genetics earlier, something where we know this person will not have a problem, even long term. Until we're at that point, I do not want to see these medications prescribed long term unless the patient wants it, because I very much believe in patients' rights. And if a person wants that risk, because I've taken risks with trying a medication that, maybe helped me enough where I have Graves' disease. I have Graves' disease. There's a medication I take sometimes for Graves' disease, and it comes with a list of possible adverse effects. I've never really had a problem with it. It's called methimazole. But when I was prescribed that, my doctor went through each possible adverse effect. Wasn't as long as the benzodiazepine list, but I chose to take it. And I'd love to see that across the board for all of these these prescriptions. I mean, they all have adverse effects. So I don't know that much compares to benzodiazepines. Maybe other psychotropics, even antidepressants, and the gabapentinoids and the Z drugs for sleep. But I think if you've gone through the bind, benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction, you've never experienced anything like it in your life. And I will just give you a graphic. Picture yourself living in a chamber of horrors, round the clock. It's amazing people survive this, and they do. And that's the thing we always have to let people know. Yes, you can. It's hard. You make it through. You can do it.
So if you're taking one of these medications that a physician gave you, so therefore it comes with this credibility that the physician gave this to you, and you're feeling like, man, something isn't quite right, they should do what?
Well, that's a good tip, because I think as doctors learn more and more about the nature of benzodiazepines, they'll start to realize that these worsening symptoms or these new symptoms are very likely related to the benzodiazepine they prescribed. And that will be an indicator that, maybe this isn't the right medication for you. And I hope many of them remind the patient, I really didn't want you to take this for more than a week or two. Come on, let's get to it before you really fall into the bind category.
Well, and whether or not any of you listening have taken any of this classification of medication, or someone who has, or you're thinking this doesn't apply to me, why am I listening to this? I think a valuable takeaway is that if you take 30,000 step foot view, there's the listen to your body and be your own advocate. And that is the piece that I think is very easy to miss. And if something, man, this just doesn't feel right, I don't know, something isn't quite right, this doesn't make sense. It's hard right now to get, insurance is expensive, seeing physicians is expensive, getting an appointment is difficult. And so sometimes it's just easier to live with whatever it is you're dealing with. And I think your point is, whatever it is, if there's something about your physical health that doesn't feel right or could be better, advocate for yourself and find an answer. And odds are the answer for most things isn't, here, take this pill for the rest of your life. There certainly are some things, but for many, many things, it isn't take this pill for the rest of your life. And it's the more complex and difficult that healthcare gets, I think the harder it is to advocate for yourself, because it's just so time consuming and expensive.
And you know what isn't expensive? So many of the things we can do to care for anxiety issues, sleeplessness. There's so many things that, we've walked away from, just the age-old wisdom of things like walking in nature. They're just basic rules of life that, if we observe them and allow people, like in the workplace, allow people to have time to practice healthy living, allow them to be able to meditate, and making sure, and I have to talk about diet. Diet is huge in this arena. It is so important to have a healthy diet. And, are they trying to tell us now that processed foods are not bad for us? Well, let's talk about that, because I'm definitely in the camp that thinks that's part of the problem.
And everyone's body responds to things so differently. About, I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast before in another episode, but almost 2 years ago, I just was like, man, something isn't quite right. Like, it's nothing medical where I know that I think, because I do the blood test and I do my annual exam. And so I know it's nothing serious, but something just wasn't as good as it had been. And I went to an alternative medical expert and took some, I would classify as kind of weird tests, and was like, well, whatever. So we did, again, what I would call strange tests at the time, and have some sensitivity. So I no longer, and I haven't since, dairy or yeast. So I just don't eat that way anymore. I don't have dairy or yeast, and I haven't. I feel totally different. I feel much better. I've sent a bunch of my friends and different people to this physician, and there are others of them out there like that. And dairy, and no one else has been diagnosed of the people I've sent to this physician, also dairy, also yeast. They've other things and other different supplements and whatever. But I think as we age and as different things happen in your life, your body adjusts and changes, and it needs different things. So there's not just one right answer, so if your friends are like, boy, you take this collagen in your coffee every day, it'll fix all your problems, or, those internet will, tell you, put this stuff in your tea at night and voila, everyone needs a different thing, and at different phases of your life. So to your point, like, control what you can control, do the best by what you need, listen to your body. And, if you can't name or say all the ingredients on a food label, probably not a food you want every day, multiple times a day.
That is a good rule of thumb. Definitely. But yes, I like to think that people would be willing to look more carefully at what they're eating. And, when somebody's dealing with terrible anxiety or sleeplessness, I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, this isn't good for you. This isn't good for you. If a pill is going to help you quickly and it works, it's really difficult for people to walk away from that. It really feels so. What I would like to see in our culture is a normalization of anxiety and insomnia and all these normal things that we have, and to become an accepting society. I know when I remember I was heard somebody saying they were not going to allow somebody to become the chairman of a certain division of was actually a nonprofit, because they're nervous when they speak. Oh, I was angry when she said that. I was angry. I said, this is what we're doing to people. We need to accept what is real about us. These are life stages we go through, and let's be sensitive to that. Let's become a more compassionate culture. And I think that if you're in a space where people practice life that way, it's a much more, it's a happier way of living. It's a way of feeling as though you're living life the way you're supposed to. Life is full of suffering. We know that. We go through these passages of suffering. But I think one of the main tenets we can know is that we can always make it to the other side of the suffering. And that's and part of that means accepting just these natural life, what the body, how the body responds to life. And then I love to talk about what people can do that's healthier for them. And, you were mentioning earlier certain dietary restrictions that you follow, which maybe restrictions isn't the right word, but yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with that.
I think in general, we encourage other people to make decisions so that they can have their best performance. And I think parents do it with children, eat your vegetables and take a nap. And then we sort of age out of that where, we can handle everything. And I think at every stage of life to consider, what choices do I have control over? What can I choose so that I can have peak performance, and not peak performance because I want to win a gold medal in the Olympics, although I do, I just don't know what sport yet. So I think my ship has sailed, but to have peak performance to live my life. And that's a different answer for everyone. But we know that there are some things that are going to diminish our ability to perform that have been proven to, we all need sleep. We all need water. We all need not to smoke. I mean, there are these things that we know is actually true for everybody. And then we have to choose if we're going to do these things, and then to get more nuanced about, okay, now what am I really willing to do? And am I really willing to go to the doctor every week, or to the physical therapist, or to get a massage, or to meditate? And I believe I've said it on another episode in a conversation, but I'm getting my master's right now in leadership. And one of our classes was about the importance of meditation, daily meditation, and what it does to your brain chemicals, and how it changes your peak performance, and how it changes your thinking and your ability to make good decisions. Now, nowhere in high school, again, I went to high school in the 90s and late 80s, but no one was talking about meditation and the value of meditation. And to your point, there are some of these, take a walk in nature and these things that we all have access to, most of us, that can do things that can help us think differently. But it takes more time than taking a pill, or having another energy drink, or having a glass of wine, which I do love a glass of wine. But I should not have 2 or 3, so these, right. That was not the peak performance. Cause if I do that tonight, man, tomorrow is not going to be as good, but these are, it's hard to do the lifestyle that you're talking about. It's much easier to continue taking a pill that you think will help you.